The sun hung low over the desert horizon, bleeding gold and crimson across the sky. Dust swirled in lazy spirals over the rough ground, kicked up by the hooves of horses tied to posts outside the small trading outpost. It was the kind of place where travelers stopped briefly, long enough for water, food, or gossip, but seldom lingered, for rumors of danger lingered as thick as the sand. Jack McCall rode in slowly, the worn leather of his saddle creaking under the weight of his frame. His hat was pulled low, casting a shadow across his sharp, sun-leathered face, and a faint layer of dust clung to his coat, hinting at days spent on the trail. The few patrons in the outpost turned to watch, sensing something about him, something in the way he carried himself, a dangerous calm that made even the grizzled men hesitate. Jack didn't waste time with pleasantries. His horse, a broad-shouldered chestnut with eyes like polished mahogany, snorted as he dismounted. The cowboy's boots hit the ground with a deliberate crunch, and his gloved hand rested casually near the butt of his revolver. Not a threat exactly, but a reminder that he was a man who had learned to survive in harsh landscapes where politeness often ended in bloodshed. He approached the nearest figure, an older trader with a sun-scorched face and a wary gaze. "Where's the Apache camp?" Jack asked, voice low but carrying enough authority to silence the chatter around them. The man blinked rapidly, shifting uneasily. "East of here, beyond the ridge and the rock formations," he said cautiously, "but they don't take kindly to strangers. Especially strangers with—" He stopped, perhaps realizing it was safer not to explain. Jack didn't wait. He mounted his horse and started toward the ridge, kicking up dust as he rode. The trading post receded behind him, a mere blur against the endless expanse of sand and rock. The silence of the desert stretched around him, broken only by the rhythmic clop of hooves. Every shadow seemed to move with intention, and every whisper of wind against stone felt like a warning. When he arrived at the edge of the Apache camp, the sight made him pause. Smoke spiraled up from a few small fires, and warriors moved with quiet precision, their eyes sharp and assessing. Women tended to children and animals, while the camp itself seemed alive yet wary, every movement purposeful, a world built on survival and vigilance. Jack dismounted and adjusted his hat, walking with slow, deliberate steps into the clearing. Every eye turned toward him. Even the children stopped their play, sensing the tension that clung to the air like the smell of sage and leather. He could feel the weight of hundreds of silent questions pressing down on him. Who is this man? What does he want? Does he bring trouble or death? Then he spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. "Give me your most beautiful horse. If you want my daughter." The words hung in the air. For a moment nothing moved. The only sound was the soft rustle of wind against canvas tents. A few warriors shifted uneasily, hands twitching toward their weapons, while Red Hawk, the Apache chief, emerged from the shadows. His presence was commanding, a figure both noble and dangerous, his dark eyes studying Jack with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Red Hawk didn't speak immediately. Instead, he let Jack's audacious demand sink in, letting the silence stretch heavy with unspoken tension. Around them, the camp seemed to hold its breath, sensing that something pivotal was unfolding. Not just a negotiation, but a test of character, courage, and perhaps destiny. Jack, for his part, didn't flinch. He met the chief's gaze steadily, aware that his next move could determine everything. The desert heat pressed down on him, but it was nothing compared to the pressure of the unblinking eyes all around. For the first time in days, he felt the thrill of challenge, the intoxicating danger of a game whose stakes were far higher than gold, far higher than pride. And in that charged moment, as the sun dipped behind the rocky horizon and shadows stretched long across the sand, a silent truth became clear. This would not be a simple trade. Nothing about this encounter would be simple. Red Hawk's eyes, dark and unyielding, never left Jack. Around them, the camp remained still, as if the desert itself had paused to witness this exchange. The chief's mind raced, weighing options that could change lives forever. On one hand, the man before him was audacious, reckless perhaps, yet undeniably bold, a quality not uncommon in the white men who occasionally crossed into Apache lands. On the other hand, his demand was outrageous, a life for a horse. Red Hawk's hands rested lightly on the hilt of his knife, not threatening, but a silent reminder that he could enforce his own will if needed. He had seen men like this before, men who thought courage alone could bend the world to their whims. But courage without respect was dangerous, not admirable. "What makes you think my daughter is yours to give?" Red Hawk finally asked, his voice calm but firm, carrying the weight of authority and centuries of wisdom. The camp held its breath, waiting for Jack's answer. Jack didn't hesitate. He met Red Hawk's gaze steadily, unwavering. "Because I'll take her if I want her," he said simply. The words were blunt, almost crude, but spoken with an unshakable confidence that made some warriors shift uneasily. Red Hawk frowned, weighing the arrogance in those words. He could see the pride in the man's posture, the certainty in his eyes and the fire in his chest. Yet he also recognized something else, a hint of desperation buried beneath the bravado. Jack was a man who had fought his way through life's hardships, who had learned that the desert respected only those who dared to challenge it. But did he understand the true cost of what he sought? The chief motioned subtly to one of his elders, a man named Two Rivers. The elder stepped forward, eyes wise and sharp, and whispered something to Red Hawk. The chief nodded slightly, making his decision. He wouldn't give in to the reckless demand, but he wouldn't reject it outright either. Instead, he would set a challenge. "You will not have my daughter by words alone," Red Hawk said, his voice ringing with authority. "You will prove yourself. Not with weapons alone, not with threats, but with courage, respect, and heart. Only then will you even be considered." Jack's eyes narrowed. "A challenge?" he asked, curiosity and caution mingling in his tone. Red Hawk nodded. "Yes, a test across the desert. A journey that will show me who you truly are. My horses are sacred, and my daughter is no prize to be won by force or foolishness. If you return with honor, perhaps then we will speak of her. If not—" His voice trailed off, letting the unspoken threat hang in the air. The camp murmured quietly among themselves, warriors exchanging glances, some skeptical, others intrigued. The challenge was unusual, even for the Apache who had faced countless outsiders in their history. But Red Hawk knew that courage and respect were inseparable. Any man who sought his daughter without understanding that would fail. Jack studied Red Hawk, the weight of the challenge pressing down on him. He had faced dangers before. Bandits, wild animals, storms that could swallow a man whole. But nothing like this. This wasn't a test of speed or strength or firepower. It was a test of character and perhaps of humility. For the first time, Jack felt a flicker of something foreign, uncertainty. The desert had always been his domain, wild and unforgiving, yet predictable in its own brutal way. But this challenge, this required more than survival. It demanded understanding, patience, and respect for a world that was not his own. Red Hawk watched him closely, sensing the internal struggle. He saw the flash of determination in Jack's eyes, tempered with hesitation. It was enough to give the man a chance, but only if he could prove that his courage was matched by honor. "Prepare yourself," Red Hawk said finally, his voice low but firm. "At sunrise you will begin. The desert will judge you. Do not falter and do not forget who you are or who you seek." Jack nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the camp, and the desert seemed to breathe around them. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied, a reminder that the true test was only just beginning. As the night fell, Jack contemplated the challenge ahead. The path would be treacherous, the desert unforgiving, and the stakes higher than any he had faced before. But one thought burned bright in his mind. He would not back down. The Apache chief, Red Hawk, returned to his tent, confident he had set a test worthy of both the desert and his daughter's honor. The desert night was unusually still, as if it too had paused to watch the unfolding drama. Jack McCall sat outside his small campfire, the flames flickering across his weathered face. He listened to the distant howl of coyotes and the soft sigh of the wind against the rocks, trying to anticipate what lay ahead. The challenge Red Hawk had set was simple in words but terrifying in implication. Cross the desert, prove courage, and earn the right to even speak of the chief's daughter. Jack's mind ran over the possibilities. The Apache did not value recklessness. He had made that clear. A simple act of bravery would not suffice. The journey would test not only his skill as a rider but also his patience, judgment, and respect for the land. Each thought weighed heavily on him. At sunrise, the desert transformed. Pale light stretched across the dunes, casting long shadows, revealing the rugged canyon paths that twisted through jagged rock formations. Jack mounted his chestnut horse, Spirit, whose broad shoulders and intelligent eyes reflected an unusual sensitivity. The horse seemed to understand the gravity of the task, stamping impatiently as Jack adjusted his reins. Red Hawk met him at the edge of the camp. His dark eyes scanned Jack from head to toe. "The desert will not forgive arrogance," he said. "It does not care for your pride or your weapons. Every step, every decision will be weighed against your heart." Jack nodded silently, feeling the weight of the chief's words settle over him. He knew this journey would demand more than his physical strength. It would demand wisdom, humility, and respect for forces beyond his control. The first leg of the journey took him through narrow canyon paths, jagged rocks scraping the sides of his horse as he navigated the winding trails. Heat rose quickly with the sun, shimmering off the stone walls, making the narrow passages feel alive, almost predatory. Jack relied on instincts honed from years on the frontier, but the desert seemed determined to challenge him at every turn. Midday brought the first true test. A sudden sandstorm whipped across the canyon, turning the world into a blur of grit and wind. Spirit balked, ears pinned back, muscles tense under Jack's grip. The storm obscured the path entirely. One wrong step could send them tumbling down a cliff or get them lost in the endless dunes. Jack's first instinct was to force the horse forward, but then he remembered Red Hawk's words. Arrogance and brute force would not win this challenge. Slowly, carefully, he allowed Spirit to guide him, following subtle changes in the wind and the faint scent of sage carried across the canyon. Hours passed in tense silence, the storm refusing to relent. By nightfall, they emerged from the storm, exhausted but intact. As darkness fell, Jack found a small canyon basin to rest. He dismounted, letting Spirit graze on sparse desert vegetation. He felt the ache of every muscle, the heat blistering his skin, and a creeping fear that this challenge might be beyond him. Yet amid the fear, a quiet determination burned brighter. He understood that survival alone would not be enough. He needed to respect the desert, respect the horse, and respect the rules of a world he had not created. That night, as he lay under a blanket of stars, Jack contemplated the Apache chief's intentions. Red Hawk had not demanded a horse, nor had he threatened with violence. Instead, he had given a chance to prove worthiness. It was a lesson in patience and humility, a mirror to Jack's own life of reckless choices. Perhaps he thought this was what the desert intended, to temper fire with restraint, boldness with wisdom. By dawn, Jack was ready. Spirit pawed at the ground impatiently, eager to move. The path ahead led to a plateau overlooking a valley, where the sacred horses were known to roam. The trial was far from over. This was merely the beginning. Every mile would test his courage, his heart, and his ability to understand the spirit of the land and the creatures that inhabited it. Jack glanced toward the rising sun, its rays igniting the red rocks with a fiery glow. He tightened his grip on the reins, set his jaw, and urged Spirit forward. The desert awaited, indifferent yet demanding, a relentless teacher with lessons only the brave or the foolish could learn. Somewhere deep in the canyons, Red Hawk's voice lingered in his mind. "The desert will judge you. Do not falter." And Jack McCall, cowboy, wanderer, and seeker of impossible odds, rode into the heart of the trial that would define him. Eliza Red Hawk watched from the edge of the camp, hidden behind a cluster of sagebrush that swayed gently in the desert wind. Her dark eyes, sharp and curious, followed every movement of the man who had dared demand her hand. Jack McCall, a name she didn't yet know but would remember, moved through the camp with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, yet carried a strange kind of determination. From the moment she overheard her father's challenge, Eliza's thoughts had been in turmoil. Most outsiders approached with gold, threats, or empty promises. Jack had come with audacity and boldness, speaking as if a daughter's life could be bargained like a horse. She despised him for that, but a flicker of intrigue sparked as she realized there was more to him than the bravado. There was fire in his eyes, and fire, she knew, could burn or illuminate. She had grown up in the shadows of the desert, learning the ways of her people, how to read the land, understand the wind, and communicate with the horses that were as much a part of the Apache as the canyons themselves. Eliza knew the sacredness of these creatures. They were not possessions, but spirits with whom one shared a bond built on trust and respect. Anyone attempting to claim them without understanding was doomed to fail. Eliza's secret, however, was her own. She hoped Jack would fail, not out of malice, but as a test of his character. If he could endure the desert, respect her people, and prove courage without cruelty or arrogance, he might be worthy of more than mere survival. He might be worthy of her trust, maybe even her heart. But if he failed, well, failure was a lesson she would observe carefully, and perhaps a relief in disguise. She stepped lightly from her hiding spot, the sand soft beneath her moccasins, and approached the edge of the corral where Spirit, the most beautiful of the horses, grazed. The stallion lifted his head as she neared, nostrils flaring, eyes alert. Eliza reached out a steady hand, whispering softly, "Patience, patience." Spirit lowered his head, nuzzling her palm with a gentleness reserved only for those who understood him. Watching Jack in the distance, she saw him pause at a rocky pass, scanning the canyon with an intensity that seemed almost reckless. She caught the subtle tension in his shoulders, the careful way he balanced determination with caution. There was potential in him, but potential alone was not enough. The desert could strip a man of life and pride in a single misstep. She knew he would need more than courage. He would need insight, patience, and humility. Eliza felt a pang of frustration mixed with admiration. The challenge set by her father wasn't just about the horses, nor was it a simple measure of physical skill. It was a test of spirit, and in watching Jack now, she understood something crucial. He was learning. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the arrogance in his movements softened, the way he coaxed his horse through treacherous paths, the way he adapted to sudden challenges, all spoke of a man willing to listen to the land rather than force it to bend to his will. For the first time, Eliza allowed herself to hope, not for the outcome but for the process. Perhaps this outsider, this cowboy who had begun as a brash intruder, might rise to something greater. Perhaps he could honor the sacred bonds of her people and the land itself, and if he did, maybe he would also honor her as a person of spirit, not as a prize to be claimed. She stepped back into the shadows, letting the wind carry her presence away. The camp remained quiet, but her thoughts were far from silent. She knew her father's challenge was just the beginning, and she knew that Jack's journey through the desert would test more than his stamina. It would test his heart, his understanding, and ultimately, his respect for life beyond his own. Eliza allowed herself one final glance at the horizon, where Jack disappeared among the canyons and the rising sun painted the rocks in gold and crimson. The desert awaited him, relentless and unyielding, and she understood that the outcome could shape not just Jack's fate, but hers as well. And deep inside, she smiled. A secret, knowing smile. She would watch, she would wait, and she would learn who this man truly was before anyone, even her father, could decide. The sun had risen high, burning bright against the endless expanse of sand and jagged rock, when Jack McCall urged Spirit forward. The chestnut stallion moved with purpose, hooves striking the hard-packed earth in a rhythm that matched Jack's own heartbeat. The desert stretched before them like a vast, indifferent ocean, beautiful, unforgiving, and alive with hidden threats. Jack had traversed deserts before, but nothing had ever tested him like this. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the landscape into wavering mirages that played tricks on the eyes. Each step demanded focus, each decision demanded wisdom. One miscalculation, a misjudged rock, a hidden crevice, a panicked horse, and the journey could end before it had truly begun. The first challenge came in the form of the terrain itself. Narrow canyon paths twisted like serpents, jagged rock walls closing in on them from both sides. Spirit's sure-footed steps kept them balanced, but Jack had to guide him carefully, leaning low to avoid scraping against the stone and listening intently to every shift in the stallion's movements. The desert was testing not only his skill but his patience. By midday, the heat became a suffocating presence and the path opened into a wide, barren plateau. Jack scanned the horizon, noting a mirage of shifting sand dunes that seemed to stretch infinitely. Water was scarce and the sun beat down with merciless intensity. He dismounted, letting Spirit graze on the sparse vegetation while he poured the last of his canteen over both their heads to stave off dehydration. The desert offered no comfort, only lessons in endurance and respect. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind whipped through the plateau, carrying with it a storm of sand and grit. Spirit balked, snorting in alarm, ears pinned back. Jack's hands tightened on the reins as visibility dropped to mere feet. The desert was testing his courage now, pushing him to confront fear directly. A wrong move could send both horse and rider tumbling over hidden cliffs or getting lost in the endless dunes. Jack remembered Red Hawk's words. The desert will judge you. Do not falter. He adjusted his approach, speaking softly to Spirit, letting the horse guide them through the chaos rather than forcing their way forward. Hours seemed to pass in tense silence, the storm raging as if it had a mind of its own. Slowly, carefully, they navigated toward a rocky outcrop that provided some shelter. By late afternoon, the storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape reshaped by wind, a reminder that the desert demanded respect, not defiance. As the evening approached, the journey became a test of observation and intuition. Jack noticed subtle signs, the way a lizard left tracks in the sand, the faint scent of water carried by the wind, and the distant sound of hooves echoing across the canyon. He realized the desert spoke to those who would listen. Every creature, every shadow, and every ripple of heat contained information that could mean life or death. That night, Jack set up a small camp, using rocks to shield the fire from gusts of wind. Spirit grazed nearby, restless but trusting, while Jack reviewed the day's trials in his mind. He had faced the desert's physical challenges, but the deeper lesson was clear. Survival alone would not earn respect or approval. The journey demanded courage tempered with humility, strength tempered with patience, and decisiveness tempered with wisdom. Lying under the endless canopy of stars, Jack felt both exhaustion and clarity. The desert was more than a battlefield. It was a teacher, revealing the flaws in arrogance and the value of listening, observing, and adapting. He understood that the sacred horses of Red Hawk's camp, and perhaps even the chief's daughter, would not be swayed by brute force or reckless bravado. Only those who proved themselves worthy in mind and spirit could hope to succeed. As dawn approached, Jack roused Spirit and prepared to move. Ahead lay deeper canyons, hidden cliffs, and perhaps the most dangerous stretch of the journey yet, the domain of the sacred horses. Every step forward would demand his best judgment. Every choice could mean triumph or disaster. But Jack felt a growing sense of purpose. He was no longer merely a cowboy seeking a prize. He was a man learning the desert's harsh truths, understanding that honor, courage, and respect were inseparable. With the first rays of sunlight painting the rocks in gold and crimson, Jack nudged Spirit forward. The desert loomed vast and endless, yet he welcomed its challenge. Every mile, every trial, every whispered lesson of the wind brought him closer to his goal, and closer to proving whether he was truly worthy. The desert opened into a wide valley as Jack and Spirit crested the final ridge, the sun illuminating a landscape of golden sand and red rock. The wind carried a distinct scent, a mix of sagebrush, earth, and something intangible, almost spiritual. Jack slowed Spirit, squinting against the sunlight. Ahead, near a sparkling oasis, stood a horse unlike any he had ever seen. Its coat was pure white, almost glowing in the desert sun, mane flowing like a river of silk. Its eyes, dark and intelligent, seemed to look straight into Jack's soul, sizing him up, reading him. Spirit, sensing the sacred presence, tensed beneath Jack. The stallion had a reputation among the Apache that few outsiders could understand. It was not merely beautiful. It was sacred. A spirit-bound creature that only allowed those worthy to approach. Jack's heart pounded. This was the test he had been preparing for. The desert had led him here, but now the true challenge would begin. He dismounted slowly, letting Spirit graze at the edge of the oasis. Every step toward the white stallion was deliberate, cautious. One false move, one misread signal, and he would fail. The horse shifted, ears twitching, nostrils flaring. Jack whispered softly, keeping his voice calm, steady, and respectful. I mean no harm. I only wish to understand you. For a long moment, the sacred horse remained still, silent, almost as if considering the words. Days of harsh desert training, the storms, the exhaustion, and the patience he had cultivated, all of it coalesced into this single moment. Jack realized that bravery alone would not win the trust of this horse. Arrogance, demands, or force could only drive it away. He had to show humility, respect, and understanding, a reflection of the lessons Red Hawk had subtly guided him to learn. Jack extended a hand slowly, palm open, allowing the horse to approach him on its own terms. The white stallion took a hesitant step forward, then another, sniffing the air, sensing Jack's intentions. The cowboy's eyes softened, his posture relaxed. He spoke not to command, but to communicate. "We are equals here. I only seek to ride with honor, not to claim you." The stallion lowered its head, brushing Jack's hand gently. Spirit, watching nearby, shifted slightly, almost acknowledging the white horse's approval. Jack's chest swelled, not with pride, but with quiet relief and awe. This was no longer about winning or gaining something. This was about earning trust through patience and respect. Suddenly, the stillness was broken by a distant rumble, a sound that set Jack on edge. Dust kicked up along the canyon entrance. He instinctively moved to position Spirit between him and the white stallion. A band of rival cowboys, drawn by rumors of a valuable horse, rode into the valley, guns raised, shouting threats. Jack's instincts screamed at him to fight, but he remembered the sacred nature of the moment. He couldn't risk harming the white stallion. Instead, he dismounted and waved his hands, shouting in a steady voice, "Stop, this is sacred land. Touch the horse and you'll answer to more than me." The cowboys hesitated, confused by Jack's boldness and the serene, commanding presence of the white stallion. Jack seized the moment, retreating slowly with Spirit, keeping both horses between him and the intruders. The sacred horse mirrored his movements, staying calm, aware of Jack's intentions. Slowly, with careful coordination, Jack guided Spirit and the stallion back toward a sheltered canyon where the intruders dared not follow. Once the danger had passed, Jack allowed himself a moment to breathe. He looked at the white stallion, now calm and almost regal in its presence. It had tested him just as Red Hawk had tested him, and now it had accepted him, not as a master but as a partner. Jack whispered almost reverently, "I understand now. Trust cannot be demanded, it must be earned. I will honor that." The white horse responded with a gentle nicker, a quiet acknowledgement that the lesson had been received. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Jack felt a shift within himself. The journey had changed him. Bravery alone would never have won the stallion's trust. Only respect, patience, and humility could. Ahead lay the next part of the journey, the return to Red Hawk's camp, and the final test of character that would determine his fate with the chief's daughter. But for now, Jack allowed himself to marvel at the sacred horse, understanding that the greatest victories were those earned with heart, not force. The desert valley had fallen silent once more, the sacred horse grazing peacefully as Jack and Spirit kept watch. The sun was low, casting long, golden shadows that stretched across the sand and rock. For a moment, Jack allowed himself a sense of accomplishment. He had earned the trust of the legendary stallion. But in the desert, triumph was always fleeting. From the ridge above, a cloud of dust appeared, rising steadily in the late afternoon heat. Jack squinted, heart sinking as he recognized the shapes of men on horseback, rival cowboys. Bandits who had been trailing him since he left the trading post charged down the slope, guns glinting in the sun. They had heard rumors of a prized white stallion and a lone cowboy seeking fortune, and now they intended to take both. Jack nudged Spirit forward, trying to position the sacred horse behind a rocky outcrop. "Stay calm," he whispered to the white stallion, whose ears flicked nervously but remained attentive. Jack knew he had no hope of outrunning all of them. There were too many, and the terrain offered little cover. He needed a plan. As the bandits reached the base of the ridge, one of them, a tall man with a scar across his face, called out mockingly, "Hand over the horse, cowboy, or it's lead for you and that beast of yours." Jack's jaw tightened. He considered charging or fighting, but he knew the consequences. The sacred horse could not be used as a weapon. Harming it even accidentally would ruin everything he had worked for. Instead, he dismounted Spirit, using the horse as cover while he moved strategically between boulders. The bandits split up, circling, trying to cut him off. Jack ducked behind a rock, pulling out his revolver. He fired a warning shot into the air, aiming not to hit but to intimidate. The men laughed, confident in their numbers. Jack realized he was outmatched, physically, numerically, and tactically. Suddenly, one of the bandits lunged at him from behind, and Jack barely blocked the attack. Another swung a rope, snaring Spirit's legs and tripping the stallion. Jack cursed under his breath, struggling to free the horse while keeping the attackers at bay. The chaos forced him back, and despite his efforts, the bandits managed to corral Spirit away from the white stallion. The sacred horse whinnied, startled, yet refused to bolt. It watched Jack with wide, intelligent eyes as he was forced to retreat, hands raised in surrender. The bandits, emboldened, bound Jack's hands with rough rope, dragging him toward their horses. Jack struggled, but the ropes cut into his wrists, and he realized that brute force alone would not save him. As they rode off, Jack glanced back at the sacred horse. Standing calmly, almost knowingly, behind the rocks, he understood then that this moment was a trial of trust and patience, just as the desert had been. Panic would not help. Anger would not help. Only careful thought and courage could turn this betrayal into a chance for redemption. The bandits led Jack to a small, abandoned canyon hideout, laughing and boasting over their capture. He was bound and tired, but his mind raced with possibilities. He studied the terrain, the ropes, and the bandits' routines, searching for an opening. Every detail mattered, every shadow, every gust of wind, every shift in the horses' positions. Hours passed, and Jack remained alert, biding his time. He thought of Red Hawk's challenge, the sacred horse, and the lessons of the desert. He realized that survival here required more than strength. It required cunning, patience, and understanding. He whispered to Spirit and the white stallion, imagining their strength guiding him. "I will not fail," he promised silently, "not for me, but for all I have come to respect." As night fell, the bandits' laughter faded into the canyon walls, and Jack prepared himself for the long hours ahead. Escape would demand courage, cunning, and the very humility he had learned from the desert and the sacred horse. He was captured, yes, but the trial was not over. Far from it, and in the stillness of the desert night, Jack McCall understood something crucial. The greatest challenges were not always the ones in front of him. They were the ones that tested his heart, his honor, and his ability to rise again when the world sought to crush him. The canyon hideout was quiet now, the only sound the faint rasp of the wind against the rocks. Jack McCall sat bound, wrists raw and aching, his chest heaving from both exertion and frustration. The bandits had grown complacent, certain that their prize, a cowboy and a legendary white horse, was secured. But Jack had learned long ago that desperation could sharpen the mind, and the lessons of the desert had tempered his instincts with patience. He studied the ropes, the positions of the bandits, and the shadows cast by the dying fire. Spirit, standing nearby but tethered, nickered softly, sensing Jack's growing focus. Jack took a deep breath, recalling the sacred horse's calm presence earlier in the valley. Brute force would not save him. Cunning, patience, and respect for the natural rhythm of things would. The first step was simple: wait. The bandits had fallen into predictable patterns. Two of them dozed near the horses. One kept watch, and another busied himself with packing supplies. Jack shifted subtly, listening to the cadence of their breathing, calculating the timing for the next move. When the moment came, he acted with quiet precision. Using a small rock he had dislodged from the canyon floor, Jack worked at the knot securing his hands. The rope yielded slowly, testing his resolve. Every second counted. The bandit on watch turned to scratch his neck, oblivious to the quiet determination building behind him. With a final tug, the rope slipped free. Jack flexed his wrists, keeping low, and moved toward Spirit. The horse nickered softly as Jack released its tether. Together they approached the bandits' horses, careful not to alert the others. Jack mounted Spirit, keeping the reins loose to avoid sudden movement. The moment of action arrived. A single sharp command to Spirit, a careful nudge with his boot, and the horse responded, moving silently toward the sleeping bandits' mounts. Jack knew he had seconds, no more, to free the sacred horse from the rocks where it had been hidden, its eyes watching him with quiet intelligence. He approached the white stallion slowly, speaking softly just as he had when earning its trust. "It's time," he whispered. "We ride together as one. Trust me." The stallion stepped forward willingly, the bond they had formed guiding each action. Jack mounted carefully, keeping Spirit and the white horse close. The bandits stirred, sensing movement, but before they could react, Jack spurred Spirit and nudged the white stallion forward. The horses leaped over rocks, navigating narrow canyon paths with a speed and precision that left the bandits struggling to catch up. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the desert as the two horses led Jack toward freedom. Behind them, the bandits shouted and fired, but their bullets fell harmlessly into sand and stone. Jack didn't look back. His focus was entirely on navigating the treacherous canyon, protecting both Spirit and the sacred horse, and proving that courage combined with respect could overcome brute force. By nightfall, the bandits had been left far behind. Jack and the two horses emerged from the canyon, the vast desert stretching endlessly before them. He dismounted, kneeling to pat the sacred stallion, feeling the steady, calm heartbeat beneath him. Spirit nuzzled his shoulder in quiet acknowledgement. Their partnership reaffirmed. Jack realized something profound. The desert, the sacred horse, and even the bandits had all been tests, not merely of skill or courage, but of character. He had been pushed to the limits of fear, frustration, and uncertainty, and yet he had prevailed through patience, cunning, and respect. The journey back to Red Hawk's camp was no longer just about winning approval. It was about honoring the lessons learned. Every step forward would be measured, deliberate, and guided by the wisdom of the desert and the trust he had earned. As the first stars appeared in the vast sky, Jack looked to the horizon with a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced failure, temptation, and danger, yet emerged stronger, wiser, and more humble. Redemption had been earned not through might, but through understanding, bravery tempered with restraint, and a willingness to act with both courage and honor. He mounted Spirit once more, nudging the sacred horse to follow. Together they rode toward the distant silhouette of the Apache camp, the desert stretching endlessly before them, a silent witness to a man transformed. The sun was just rising when Jack McCall and the two horses crested the final ridge overlooking Red Hawk's camp. From a distance, the fires still glimmered in the early light, and figures moved cautiously among the tents. Jack's chest tightened, not with fear but with the weight of everything he had learned. The journey had changed him. Bravery alone could no longer define him. Respect, humility, and understanding had earned him his place here. Red Hawk emerged from the central tent, his dark eyes fixed on Jack. Behind him, Eliza watched from a distance, her gaze sharp and knowing, yet unreadable. The chief's expression was calm, yet it held the weight of centuries of wisdom. This was the final test, not one of survival, but of character. "You have returned," Red Hawk said, voice deep and measured, "and you have done so not through force alone, but through patience and understanding. You have proven much, Jack McCall, but the final choice is yours and yours alone." Jack dismounted Spirit, moving deliberately to stand beside the sacred white stallion. He felt the steady rhythm of its heartbeat beneath his hand, a quiet reassurance that the lessons of the desert had not been forgotten. Red Hawk gestured toward his daughter, Eliza, who stepped forward. Her dark eyes studied Jack intently. "The challenge was never about horses alone," the chief said. "It was about respect, courage, and humility. And now you must choose. Will you take my daughter's hand as a prize, or will you earn it through understanding, partnership, and honor?" Jack felt the weight of the moment. He had come seeking a daughter's hand as if it could be claimed, demanded, or bargained for. But the journey had taught him that love, trust, and respect could not be won through audacity alone. He looked at Eliza, whose gaze held quiet intelligence, a subtle defiance, and the unspoken truth that she was not property, but a person of spirit. I understand," Jack said finally, his voice low but firm. "I cannot take what has not been freely given. I came seeking something I thought I deserved, but now I see that trust, respect, and understanding must guide every choice. If she chooses me, it will be because of who I have become, not because of what I demanded." Red Hawk's expression softened, a rare smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Then you understand the final lesson," he said. "Honor is earned, not taken. Love is not a prize. It is a partnership, built on trust, respect, and shared understanding." Eliza stepped closer, her eyes meeting Jack's. There was a flicker of warmth, a subtle acknowledgement of the journey he had undertaken. "You have changed," she said quietly, her voice carrying across the still morning air. "And you have shown you can listen, learn, and respect not just me but the land and the life around us. That is worth more than any prize." Jack extended his hand slowly, allowing her the choice to take it or not. She hesitated for a moment, then placed her hand in his, a gesture of partnership rather than possession. It was a small but profound act, a recognition that their bond would be built on equality, trust, and mutual respect. Red Hawk nodded, satisfied. "Then it is done," he said. "Not because of demands nor because of force, but because you have both earned this path together." The sacred white stallion shifted, nudging Jack gently as if acknowledging the man's growth and the partnership that had formed between him. Spirit and Eliza. The desert itself seemed to exhale, the wind carrying whispers of approval across the valley. Jack looked out over the canyon, feeling the weight of the journey lift slightly. The challenges of the desert, the trials of the bandits, the trust of the sacred horse, and the wisdom of Red Hawk had all culminated in this single, powerful truth. Courage without humility is hollow, bravery without respect is empty, and love without understanding is meaningless. Together, Jack and Eliza mounted their horses, the chestnut and the sacred white, and rode toward the horizon. Red Hawk watched them leave, a father satisfied not just with the man who had returned, but with the lessons learned, the respect earned, and the partnership forged. For Jack, the desert had been the greatest teacher of all, and its lessons would guide him every step of the way. The morning sun stretched across the horizon, bathing the desert in soft gold and crimson. Jack McCall and Eliza rode side by side, Spirit and the sacred white stallion moving with a quiet harmony that mirrored the bond between their riders. The vast desert stretched endlessly before them, a living witness to the trials, lessons, and transformations that had brought them to this moment. Jack glanced at Eliza, noticing the subtle strength in her posture, the calm determination in her eyes. This was no longer a story of a man demanding a daughter's hand. It was the story of partnership, trust, and mutual respect. The journey had taught him that courage alone could never earn love, that audacity without understanding could only lead to failure. Now every step he took was guided not just by instinct, but by wisdom gained from the desert, the sacred horse, and the trials he had endured. Eliza's gaze swept across the canyon below, her expression thoughtful. "The desert is unforgiving," she said quietly, almost to herself, "but it teaches those who are willing to listen. And it seems you have learned." Jack nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I had a good teacher," he replied, looking at Spirit and then at the white stallion. "And even better lessons." The sacred white horse nickered softly, stepping close to Jack as if acknowledging the man's growth. Spirit nudged him as well, a reminder that loyalty and trust were earned, not commanded. The two horses, once symbols of challenge and trial, now represented unity and understanding, a bridge between cultures, between human and animal, between courage and humility. As they rode, the desert seemed to embrace them. The wind carried a gentle melody, the soft rustle of sagebrush blending with the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. The vast expanse that had tested Jack's every limit now appeared welcoming, almost protective, as if recognizing the man he had become. Every rock, every canyon, every grain of sand had left its mark on him. Not scars, but lessons etched into character and spirit. They paused at a small ridge overlooking Red Hawk's camp. From here the tents were visible, fires burning faintly and figures moving with purpose. Jack's gaze met Red Hawk's from a distance. The chief nodded, his expression one of deep satisfaction and quiet pride. It was a nod that acknowledged not just Jack's survival, but his transformation, a man tempered by challenge, guided by respect, and willing to honor what he had earned. Eliza leaned slightly closer to Jack, her hand brushing his. "The desert doesn't just test strength," she said softly. "It reveals who you truly are. And now we know who we can become together." Jack exhaled slowly, feeling a calm he had never known. The journey had been treacherous, the trials relentless, yet the reward was more than he had imagined. It was not merely love or admiration. It was understanding, partnership, and mutual respect, born of endurance, patience, and humility. Together, they urged their horses forward, descending into the valley below. Spirit and the white stallion moved in perfect unison, a living testament to the harmony between the riders and the land. The desert, once an adversary, now appeared as a companion, its lessons carried in every step, every breath, every heartbeat. Red Hawk watched from his vantage point as the pair disappeared into the canyon, knowing that the future was secure not because of force or fear, but because trust, courage, and respect had been earned. The sacred horse, the desert, and the trials had fulfilled their purpose. Jack and Eliza had learned the greatest lesson of all. Life's true rewards are never claimed. They are grown, nurtured, and honored. As the sun climbed higher, casting light across the endless desert, a sense of peace settled over the land. Jack and Eliza rode on side by side, with Spirit and the sacred white stallion leading the way, a new chapter unfolding built on partnership, courage, and a profound respect for the world and each other. And in the stillness of the desert, where shadows and light danced across the rocks, it was clear this was more than a journey of horses, bandits, and daring. It was a journey of heart, of understanding, and of the enduring power of respect.